Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 335 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to finish up with some remaining research and start making some new items from the resources that we've made. Enjoy. And we've got a few options here, but we should probably stick with things that would be immediately useful to us. Well, a big one would be doing battery 3, the final tier of batteries, where silver nitrite and sodium hydroxide goes in. We get silver oxide and then mix that with our new zinc plates, or sodium hydroxide and plastic, to make batteries. And then we can make the final tier of accumulators. And also upgrade our personal batteries, assuming we had all of the prerequisite research. But nonetheless, we will need batteries. And it's kind of an offshoot of what we've been doing now, since it requires a silver product, so we might as well hit it. And as far as what else to do, well, something we will immediately need in the near future is better heat exchangers. Now, this certainly would have helped with our nuclear setup, making it smaller, but that can affect future builds, so we might as well get it. Requires our new tungsten plates. So sure. And since it's kind of related to the same thing, let's do the boiler 4 and the fluid burning boiler 3. And how about the fluid burning generator? Basically, we're getting all of this purple tech research completed that we didn't have before. And it's not entirely the same thing, but how about electric furnace 2, which we can now make now that we have tungsten. And how about the filtering furnace version as well? And that's a lot of purple in the research queue. Kind of want to see how this operates when it runs out of oil residuals. I'm guessing it is going to completely run out of residual gas here. We are potentially throwing away our carbon monoxide. So I kind of want to stop doing that and see what happens to it. That if the rate increases, then there is a process to which we can convert carbon monoxide into synthesis gas by adding hydrogen. And that would also help this process, since it's specifically using the synthesis gas to make the naphtha. It seems to be holding pretty steady here. So it seems like it's basically generating it. And it's totally going through those residuals really fast. Basically about to run out. So that's pretty clear that we do need this setup to dump the fuel oil away. But we don't necessarily want to dump all of it. We just need to dump enough fuel oil so naphtha doesn't completely run dry. So how about we have 2 on conditions for this pump. They're kind of overlapped there, so let's just move them. I guess I'll use a green wire to keep them separate. One condition is that naphtha is super low, so let's say 10%, which in this case is 5,000. Get a green square. And the other one could be fuel oil is essentially maxed out, which we could say is, how about 90% or 45,000. And we could upgrade the tank sizes, but I don't want to change all the numbers. So if both of those are true, this pump can turn on. And that research is happening nice and quickly. So this pump will require 2 green signals. And it's not running now, but I kind of want to see what happens. And definitely this tank is quickly running down. And carbon monoxide is being held steady, so it very much seems to be negative on the carbon monoxide. We'll let that run down. It might take a little while, even though research is happening pretty quick. There's a couple of things we could immediately put on our bus here. And now that we're down to the last warehouse, it looks like we probably need to build another train station. So I guess it's a good thing that we have all those train parts on the bus. But we did unlock some higher tier pipes. The best ones being the nitinol or the copper tungsten pipe. But the nitinol requires titanium, which is something that is easy to create right now, where tungsten is not. So that means that we probably want to start making some nitinol pipes. So we need to make a nitinol request. And the other thing that we need to make a request for are the nickel plates, because that's kind of what got us started on this process, is we needed nickel for our Roboport antenna arrays. So now we need to copy this, but I think we have potentially an old version of this right here. But I'm guessing it's probably pretty close to the same. So it would fit in here somewhere. That basically seems fine. We'll have to kind of move some stuff, but yeah, we'll just put it there. I don't really see the need to upgrade all these stations, but we are right here, so while we're thinking about it, let's at least upgrade the inserters for the main bus here. Hopefully all the pipes are back to where they need to be. And we're connected again. And I'm seeing naphtha flicker, which tells me that, yep, we are completely out. So without pumping away the fuel oil, we are always going to run out. And since this is the only source of oil residuals in the factory, we can't exactly pipe it in from somewhere else, and we are close to running out of them. So we need to transition our factory away from using them altogether. And it looks like this was sending the status of the oil residuals to the factory. But we don't need to do that anymore since we're getting rid of it. So, is this pump trying to turn on now? Yep. Let's see how it works. We hook it up, and it should empty until about 90%, and there it stops, just to leave enough room for the naphtha to fire up. And you see when it does fire up, it creates tons of oil residuals, which also goes into making naphtha. And hopefully our factory will be able to deal with this fuel oil. We probably can, because we're still going to have some residual gas left over for making fuel blocks after all this is said and done, even when we're running on nuclear. So we will have some options available to us. I don't know, it just seems like it's going really slowly because it can't do the oil separation, which I'm guessing is because it doesn't have the synthesis gas. So what this means is we need a tank in place to give that process priority. Or we can just put a valve in here. We can unhook this and basically do an overflow to make sure that the system always has a bare minimum amount in here. I guess we're done, so we can get rid of that flashing. Which, if we did that, it could potentially dump it, but I don't think we really need to dump this anymore since we're so negative on it. The system might take a second to get started here because it's basically clogged on itself. There we go. Seems like it's starting to build up some synthesis gas in the pipes, which means eventually it'll get maxed out. Just because this thing here is using quite a bit of synthesis gas to maximize the amount of methane that we get. And it does create carbon monoxide, but ultimately I think this process is negative. It's just creating it right now because it's not really making much naphtha because it's filling up on the synthesis gas first. So we'll have to check back on that in a bit. Make sure it's operating correctly. Well, that research is done. We might as well just start grabbing stuff. Blue alien artifact research. We add tungsten to blue artifacts to get blue alien alloy, which seems good. And then that gives us special armor piercing bullets. But biters are not very strong versus us anymore. But hey, might as well get it researched. And we can actually do turret 5s now. The best kind. Why not? And because we can do silver zinc batteries, we can make the better laser ammo types. Sure, we're not really making that, so it doesn't really affect us either way. And how about offshore pump 4, which would require that nitinol. Basically, we're just kind of getting a lot of stuff we might need in the future, but we don't really need now, but we might as well research it. Okay, so we're not making speakers or the L10 combinators, but that makes sense. Hopefully that combinator is off, and it is. And yeah, that's a copy. So if we want them to work correctly, they have to be named correctly. So that's main 3, so this is actually going to be main 4. And get rid of the request for now, except for the one. Okay, we need to make one more request. Let's make this one the nickel sheet coils. And then nickel sheet coil, negative 512. And let's see, are the numbers pretty good for everything? Seems like it. It's 320 for the stack threshold, so we'll want to check the other one, but it should make the request in a second. Kind of want to just copy it over to make sure the settings are exactly the same. Then we can quickly turn it off, get rid of the request. Because now we also need to ask for that nitinol. So it'll go into that one. And finally, make the request. So when the trains are ready, we should get 2 of them. So how is this going now? Alright. We've built up a nice supply of synthesis gas. And it's just about ready to be consistent here. And those are the requests coming through. Nice. Well, although the naphtha tank is empty, there is naphtha in the pipe, so technically science is occurring as it should, even though the tanks are empty. So how are the trains doing? Loading up on nickel, and it seems to be operating right, and loading up on nitinol. Oh yeah, we had something a little weird happening right here. But we can just hop over it. Okay, we need a plate chopper. It's probably going to be roughly the same speed as everything else here. And good news here is that we have 2% of our naphtha in the tank now, so it means that this process is just barely positive enough on its own residuals in order to keep naphtha filled without us having to dump a ton of oil. We are dumping some, but just the bare minimum necessary for this process to work. Awesome. Well, we're going to need to make our pipe somewhere. And this is something that's going to be created in huge quantities. So we should probably make a setup for it. And what's funny is that we're basically done now with ceramic pipes. So if we just replace this whole setup, it should work on the new equipment. So let's toss some better machines in here, better modules, and switch them out. And actually these are obscenely fast, much faster than we ever have hoped to fill them up with. But that's fine, we'll just put some stack inserters in here and say we're fine. It's not like we need to make that much of this stuff. Here, let's just throw a requester chest in here. How about 2 of them? I think these ceramic pipes might actually go into things. So it's actually kind of tricky. But whatever. We will grind through what we have here. And hopefully they get sent to the right location. Okay, time for more research. With the nitinol pipes, we can now do the best storage tanks and the best pumps. We can do armored locomotives, so sure. And same with the armored fluid wagons. And we also have the better version of puffer breeding, where we essentially can focus on making a certain type of puffer egg rather than just getting kind of a random assortment of them. Our current setup works, but it's some remaining research, so we should grab it. And how about we get rockets? Probably don't need them as a weapon, but that requires a warhead and a body. Warhead is just explosives, and the body is a rocket engine and various other things. And the rocket engine is something that needed tungsten. So we're definitely going to need that. I guess we can start grabbing all of these random alien rocket types. Just kind of the same as the ammo, that it has different elemental effects. So we can just go through them while they're on the list here. Looks like the train arrived, delivering the nitinol and also the nickel. Well, one thing we can do is put a buffer chest in here since we have nickel sheet coils left over. And just say, grab them and put them in. And I noticed something. The U-235 reactor is online. It was only for a little while, but it ran long enough to create the power that we needed. And it was just a second, but you see our accumulator charge got low enough to need it. And it's going down again. So when it gets to 30, this latch will close. And the reactor will generate power again. It won't generate heat, it'll just generate power. And there it goes. And then when the heat of the reactor gets low enough, is when it'll start burning fuel again. But because it's so powerful, it really only needs to operate for a few seconds at a time. But doing it in this way is 100% efficient with our fuel, so we're not wasting any fuel to lost heat from the reactors just being too hot. I am curious that the system started up and we still have oil residuals left over. Well, I guess that answers the question. That our current setup is just not powerful enough. It's going at full blast, and well, that explains it. 5.1 gigawatts, but the reactor's online right now, so it has to shut down. But that kind of shows you that our current setup for making fuel blocks is actually not strong enough to power the factory with everything that's going on. So that's a little problematic, but ultimately this part of the factory is a lot weaker. Like you see, it's going at full blast and it's like 1.2 gigawatts, something like that. There's probably some other steam engines that are running, but ultimately this part of the factory pales in comparison to the nuclear reactors. So this is turning on a little sooner than I thought it would, but nonetheless that's cool to see. And we're almost below 600 now, so when that happens, the reactors will fire up, at least these ones. Yeah, those ones turned on. And these ones turned on. They're not all linked together. They turn on and off as they see fit. But now they're generating heat. So it's kind of interesting how the reactors' need to create heat is completely disconnected from the factory's need for electricity. That the reactors turn on when the heat is too low, and the turbines turn on when the electricity is too low. So they're not directly connected, and by disconnecting them like that, you keep them nice and efficient, where you don't waste any heat. So the reactors turn off because they're no longer needed, and it's around 750 degrees, nowhere near 1,000. And now that that's running, it does need to make a little bit of fuel, but it's only a fraction of what this setup can do, so it's not too big a deal, and still no U-234, but what can you do? We just need to let this run for a while until we get approximately 50 plutonium or so, because we need 40 for the recipe, and then some of it is going to get stuck in these splitters. So we just need to get one machine's worth and then unhook everything else and only run that one machine until we get one machine running at full blast, then we can get two machines running at full blast, and so on until we have all 6 running as fast as they can go. And this was based on having 60 uranium per second come in when we only have 30, so in fact this setup is much hungrier than we could ever successfully feed at this point. I'm kind of surprised that that is running and we haven't even run out of residuals. But we're honestly getting pretty close. Like you see that it's going, but the thing we're actually low on is fuel oil, which is interesting. Shouldn't this be going at full blast essentially? Let's see, we are maxed out on mineral oil. It's trying to get rid of it, but we have synthesis gas left over, which it's trying to turn into methanol, and for the most part succeeding, but we don't have any carbon dioxide. So is that where the failure of this whole setup is? We had to follow the train, but that might be it, because this is at 20%, which is where it should be, but you notice right as it leaves the tank, instead of being at 20%, it's at like 13. So it could be that that level is simply too low for the factory. So I think that's kind of why we're seeing the reaction that we are with the various machines. It's kind of interesting how the factory works in that sense, where you really have to follow it down the chain to find out what the actual problem was. And that was like many tiers of processes back in the line to find out what was causing that slowdown. But that makes sense because 20% is a very low operating level for fluids here. And I'm not sure if other processes depend on the status of this tank, but I'm guessing if anything happens, it's probably 80% or above. So instead of going to 15,000, let's double it and go to 30. So this is going to try to get it up to 40%. And then this one can go to like 45, so 60%. But I'm guessing this setup probably won't run very often because there's just not enough resources for it. Because we're not growing trees in large quantities anymore. Okay. So running the carbon dioxide up helps. At least the level in the pipe is above 20%. We could put a pump on there, but the problem is other processes create carbon dioxide, so we don't want it to necessarily get super low. And let's see, the shortage is getting rid of the residual gas now, which is going through these two machines as fast as it can, but they're still short on the synthesis gas. So I'm wondering if we should just crank this up with speed modules. It's like a steam locomotive, it's going so fast. Let's see, does that still keep up? Seems like it. Yep, it cleared out the synthesis gas, which cleared out the residuals for these. They're still kind of maxing out on the synthesis gas, so we might actually need 2 of these. But at least now we have fuel oil again. So what that tells me is, although it's a little slow right now, it's fast enough. And now the rest of this is running at full blast again, so that's the best we can hope for. But weren't we in a situation where this setup could make way more than the belts we had? Yes. And now that we have purple tier of items, we should be able to really crank this up. So let's try to upgrade everything. It's kind of funny, we're upgrading a setup that is largely going to be replaced by the nuclear reactors, but nonetheless, this will still be here, and it'll still be producing power. It just won't be the primary way of making power anymore. But it's still going to be here. Alright, well that was cranked up, but now these belts in the middle are too slow. Let's see what we can get out of them. Well, it's certainly going. Probably don't need to put any more effort into that, because that's a pretty good flow of fuel blocks. And there's some other things we can do to increase the efficiency of this setup. But I kind of want to wait for the repository to actually run out of residuals first. So this system will be thoroughly cleared of all of its fuel before we start finding ways to change it. But it was cool seeing the nuclear reactors online. For a little bit anyway. We'll probably start seeing them more often now. But doing all this research is a good test to make sure that our power can keep up, since we made all those module changes. The factory certainly does use a lot of power now. But our nickel coils made it. So now they're being placed here. And it's funny, they're actually just going straight into there, so I guess we don't really need robots for that, since they're direct inserted. Oh, interesting, we're out of insulated wire. Let's just do something like this and say it's looking for, I don't know, 100. But no more insulated wire. That must have been coming from a huge supply of it that we had that we no longer do. So that's why that stopped. Because for a while we had way too much of it. So from now on we're going to have to deliver it. It's not the smartest thing in the world to deliver because of how big it is, but it also doesn't go into very much stuff. Really, at this tier, it's just the roboports. And for these other setups, we just make the wire locally. So I think for this case, since we just don't need this many of them, it is acceptable to make a provider chest for this. So robots are bringing the wire now. And now we're making what we need. So we should be able to start doing logistic zones. Alright, well we have some more rocket colors to do. So we'll just hit the acid rocket, hit explosive rocket, hit poison, and hit flame. And we're getting pretty close to basically being done here with all of the relevant things. There's water chemistry, but we don't actually need to do any of this stuff right now, and it doesn't lead into anything until water chemistry 2, so we can kind of just skip it. The RTG is for space stuff, so is heat shielding, and look at that. We can touch the rocket silo. We are 1 square away of research on this item anyway. And the blue circuits, of course we'll want to make accumulators, but we can just kind of wait until we're ready for that. and the Biter Refugium, but that's for basically higher tier of modules. And low density structure is essentially the same thing. We would be doing this structure for these labs, so we don't really need to research it quite yet. So that catches us up with all of the tungsten research that we needed to do. We did have enough nickel to upgrade our characters' roboports. The crawler could certainly use a few. And I guess we can place all these zone expanders across the factory. That our current ones are a 60 by 60 supply area, where it's 90 by 90 for zone 3. So much better. It doesn't help us in the sense that we already have the factory covered, and it's not like we're going to move all these zone expanders just for that. Oh, there's a little space right there. But it would actually help situations like this, where there are tiny spaces, and they would get properly filled in if we move something around. So essentially, oh, there's one right there too. Of course, I'm fixing it with the old stuff, but essentially the value of it is, let's say we're building a setup and we needed to move some of the roboports around. Well, if they had a longer reach than when we initially placed them there, then we could get away with moving them further away before it started causing issues. So because of that, it's probably worth upgrading the entire factory to use them. Okay, let's do an upgrade planner, and since we're upgrading the entire factory, we want to get rid of all this stuff so it doesn't upgrade anything we don't intend on it to. Where we're going from 2 to 3. We've done this once before and it was pretty smooth. But nonetheless, here we go again. Let's lag the computer. Oh man. Whew. 2.3K. There. Have fun. Robots have a lot of work to do now. But it'll actually get done a lot faster than you might expect. And there we go. Caught up with research. We're getting very close to the final research pack. But I kind of don't want to get started on that right now, because if we do, we're just going to unlock things that we can't currently build. So before we do that, we should probably get blue circuits ready to go. And in fact, they're directly required in order to make the final tier of lab that can actually use the yellow science packs to begin with, so we don't have a choice in that sense. But also we need those silver zinc batteries, and making accumulators takes forever, and that will benefit us right now, so we should probably work on those batteries. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.